The last of the sun clung stubbornly to the horizon, spilling its molten light across the plains until the land seemed to burn with fire. Dust swirled with every lazy breath of wind, and the sky above stretched white and merciless, painted with streaks of orange and violet. Jack Hollister guided his horse along the dry riverbed, its hooves crunching against the gravel. He had spent the day rounding up stray cattle, his shirt dark with sweat, his shoulders aching from the saddle. All he wanted was to head home, pour himself a tin cup of coffee, and sit in silence as the stars came out. But the sound reached him first, ragged, frantic footsteps crashing through the brush. His hand instinctively dropped toward the revolver on his hip as his horse tossed its head, uneasy. Then she appeared. She stumbled out from a cluster of cottonwoods like a figure torn out of some fever dream. Her dress was torn and dirt-streaked, her hair loose and tangled. She looked like she had been running for miles, like every breath in her lungs was scraped raw. For a moment she didn't even seem to see Jack, her eyes darted wildly, searching the shadows behind her. Then, with a choked sob, she tore something from around her neck and hurled it to the ground. Her voice carried across the riverbed, thin but sharp enough to cut through the twilight air. "I took it off, please." The words froze Jack in his saddle. He had seen fear before, outlaws with the sheriff's noose waiting for them, settlers cornered by raiders, even his own reflection after the night he buried his wife. But this was different. This was not fear of dying. This was fear of being dragged back to something worse than death. His gaze dropped to the dust where the object lay. A necklace, delicate gold catching the faint light, with a stone at its center the color of blood. Jack didn't need to touch it to know it didn't belong out here in the frontier. It was a thing from ballrooms and chandeliers, not from the hard, unforgiving land where most people had nothing but calloused hands and stubborn pride. The woman pressed her boot against it, shoving it farther away as though even its presence burned her. Her hands shook violently. "They'll come for it, for me. Please, don't let them take me back." Jack sat rigid in his saddle, every instinct warring within him. A man living on the edge of the plains learned fast that other people's problems had a way of becoming your own, and usually at the cost of blood. He could ride on, pretend he hadn't seen her. The necklace alone meant powerful men were involved, men who wouldn't hesitate to put a bullet in his back. But something about her voice pulled at him, some raw truth buried in the plea. It struck deep into the part of him that had been hollow since the day his wife died, since the day he realized the world didn't care if good people were trampled under the boots of the cruel. He felt that hollow ache stir now, twisting into something dangerous, compassion. The air shifted, heavy with tension. In the distance, the faint sound of hoofbeats rose, steady and purposeful. Jack turned his head, listening. More than one horse. Men riding hard. The kind of men who didn't stop until they caught what they were after. The woman heard them too. Her eyes widened with terror, her body tensing as though she might bolt again, even though her legs seemed ready to collapse beneath her. She clutched the side of Jack's stirrup without realizing it, clinging to the only solid thing in her world. Jack's hand slid to the Colt at his side. The familiar weight steadied him, though it also carried the weight of choice. If he stood with her, he would be making enemies he didn't yet know. If he turned away, he would be free to ride into the twilight and let her fate catch up with her. The hoofbeats grew louder, pounding like drums of war. Dust rose along the far ridge, and dark silhouettes began to emerge against the burning sky. 3, maybe 4 riders, pushing their mounts hard. They were close, too close. Jack's heart hammered against his ribs. He remembered the words she had spoken, trembling but unbroken. "I took it off, please." Whatever that necklace meant, whatever chains it symbolized, she had cast it aside. She wasn't running for riches, she was running for freedom. And if he turned away now, he would be no better than the men chasing her. His jaw tightened, the leather reins creaking in his grip. He knew the moment he moved, there would be no turning back. The life he had kept simple, the solitude he had guarded for years, it would all end here, on this dusty riverbed. The woman's fingers clutched tighter at his stirrup, her eyes wide, shimmering with a desperate hope she barely dared to feel. The riders closed in, their voices starting to carry through the dry evening air. Jack's breath came slow and deliberate. Every instinct screamed at him to let this storm pass. But storms didn't pass, they broke or they burned everything in their path. He had to choose. The hoofbeats thundered closer, his hand hovered at his side. And in that suspended moment, as the world narrowed to the woman's pleading eyes and the echo of riders drawing near, Jack Hollister realized his life was about to change forever. The riders appeared in a spray of dust, black silhouettes against the blood-red sky. They came hard and fast, their horses lathered with sweat, the kind of riding men did when they were hunting rather than traveling. Jack counted 3 of them as they closed in, the lead rider broad-shouldered, his face carved with a scar that stretched from temple to jaw. His rifle lay easy across his saddle horn, and there was no hesitation in his gaze when it fixed on Jack and the woman beside him. The scarred man pulled up short, his horse snorting, hooves scattering gravel. The 2 others flanked him, one wiry with eyes that darted like a rat's, the other heavy-set and calm in a way that spoke of cruel patience. Together, they looked like men who had long since traded conscience for coin. "Well, now," the leader drawled, his voice slow but edged like a knife. His eyes cut from Jack to the woman and down to the necklace lying in the dirt. "Thought you could run forever, darlin'. Thought you could throw away what's mine." The woman's body trembled, but her voice, thin and broken though it was, carried through the silence. "I took it off. It's not mine anymore. I won't go back." Jack felt her fingers clutch tighter at the leather of his stirrup, as though his presence alone was the last wall between her and the abyss. His gut twisted. The scarred man leaned forward, his smile a wolf's grin. "Pretty thing like you don't get to decide. That necklace, that dress, that face, you belong where you were put. Hand her over, cowboy. Ain't no sense dying for someone else's mess." Jack slid from his saddle, boots landing with a solid thud in the dust. He didn't draw, not yet, but his hand hovered close enough to his Colt that the 3 men shifted uneasily in their saddles. His voice came low, steady, like a man who had weighed every word before speaking it. "She don't want it. That makes it worthless." The leader's grin widened, though his eyes hardened. "Worthless to her. Worth a fortune to the men back east who'll pay to see her dragged home, kicking and screaming if need be. You think you're saving her, rancher? You're just standing in the way of business." Jack's jaw tightened. The truth of it struck hard. This wasn't about a trinket, wasn't even about the woman as a person, it was about ownership. About chains too fine for most men to see. These weren't thieves chasing stolen gold, they were hunters of something far darker. For one long breath, time seemed to hang still. The evening wind whistled through the cottonwoods. The horses pawed at the dirt. Jack felt the weight of his choice settle fully on him. Walk away and live another day, or make his stand now, and let the whole world shift on its axis. He turned his head just enough to see the woman's face. Her eyes were rimmed red, her lips quivering, but behind the terror there was something else, the faintest flicker of hope, fragile as glass. Jack made his decision. With a motion so smooth it might have been instinct, he drew his Colt. The revolver cleared leather faster than the eye could follow, its barrel glinting in the fading light. He leveled it squarely at the scarred man. "Then you'll have to pay with your blood." For a heartbeat the world froze. The 3 riders stared, calculating. The woman held her breath, her nails biting into Jack's saddle leather. Even the crickets seemed to pause. Then the scarred man snapped his rifle up. The crack of gunfire shattered the stillness. Jack dropped to one knee, the recoil of his Colt snapping through his arm. One of the riders lurched violently and tumbled from his saddle, hitting the ground with a choked cry. Dust and blood sprayed across the gravel. The scarred man's shot went wide, splintering bark from a cottonwood behind Jack. Before the outlaw could steady his aim again, Jack fired a second time, the round slamming into the man's shoulder. The force spun him in the saddle, his rifle clattering to the ground as he howled in pain. The 3rd man's courage cracked. He yanked his reins hard, his horse wheeling in panic. He fired a wild shot over his shoulder that kicked up dirt at Jack's feet, then spurred his mount into a gallop, fleeing across the open plain with fear snapping at his heels. The echo of gunfire faded. Dust settled back to the earth. The only sound left was the ragged breath of the woman and the pained groans of the scarred man slumped in his saddle, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Jack rose slowly, Colt still in his hand, eyes never leaving the outlaw leader. He could end it now, put the man down and finish the job clean. But he holstered the weapon instead, his decision made. Killing him would stain the woman's freedom with blood she didn't need to carry. The outlaw glared, sweat dripping from his face, but the strength had gone out of him. He spat a curse and jerked his horse around, retreating into the dusk with his wounded pride trailing like smoke. Silence claimed the riverbed once more. The woman sagged, collapsing against Jack's horse as the adrenaline bled out of her. Tears spilled freely, but this time they weren't from fear. She was shaking, half from exhaustion and half from the weight of what she had escaped. Jack bent, scooping the necklace from the dirt. The crimson stone caught the last flare of sunset, glowing like fire in his palm. For a long moment he stared at it, thinking of what it represented, the chains she had carried, the men who had hunted her. Then, without hesitation, he dropped it back into the dust and ground his boot down hard, pressing until the delicate gold links snapped and the stone was buried beneath the earth. "Whatever that was," Jack said quietly, his voice rough but certain, "it don't own you anymore." The woman's eyes met his, wide with disbelief, then softened with relief so pure it nearly broke him. "Thank you," she whispered, the words trembling out as though she had never spoken them to anyone before. Jack nodded once, not needing to say more. He helped her onto his horse, her small frame unsteady but determined. With one last glance at the horizon, now swallowed by night, he swung up behind her. Together, they rode into the gathering darkness, leaving the broken necklace in the blood-stained dust behind. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, perhaps more battles yet to come. But for the first time in years, Jack felt the stirrings of purpose. The road was no longer his alone.